Thanks, Matt. Well, let's get back to our conversation with Geoffrey Garrett. Geoffrey, one thing we haven't really spoken about this morning is how Australia fits into this picture in terms of commodities. Will there continue to be tensions, do you think, between China and Australia based on who wants what?
Well, it's a very interesting relationship. You know, we had a new Australian Prime Minister almost 2 years ago now who speaks Mandarin, the first Western world leader to do that. There were early concerns that he was too close to China. Now everyone's concerned that he's playing too much hardball with China. In the longer run, obviously, I think the big story for Australia as a country is a growing economic relationship with China balanced against a security alliance with the United States. That balancing act is the thing that has kept Australia peaceful and prosperous for decades. The question is whether it can be continued going forward. I think the answer is yes, but it's not going to be plain sailing.
Okay, well, if we bring up a key example, of course, being Chinalco, Rio Tinto investment was dropped at the last minute. That led to extremely sour grapes. And then following on from that, the arrest of 4 Rio Tinto executives. When you look at the relationship now between China and Australia, has it been dented?
I think it probably has been dented. The Chinese interpretation of the Chinalco Rio was that the Foreign Investment Review Board in Australia sat on its hands and waited until internal Rio decision-making changed its mind about Chinalco, so that there was an elite Chinese view that the Rudd government actually was complicit in that. If you turn to the Stern Hu arrest, I think the thing we learned from that is that for the Chinese government in particular, there's no difference between national security and national economic security. So anything that has to do with big money and commodities, the Chinese will take very seriously.
Geoffrey, while we're in this recovery mindset, is it important nonetheless to remain cognizant about the risks to the broader economy? Where do you think those risks are going to come from? Is it at the commercial real estate sector in the US? Is it the risk of a hard landing in China?
Well, the U.S. story, at least among people I talk to, really does point to these what's estimated to be a $3 trillion reset in the commercial real estate market. Is that all going to go smoothly, or are we going to have some other big surprises? I think the other story in the U.S. at the moment is the weakness of President Obama. I don't think anyone would have expected that a few months ago. It really was a terrible summer for him. The healthcare problem is going to continue. It looks bizarre and arcane to outsiders, but I think it will affect both the American economy and American global leadership. And then on the Chinese side, it seems to me the big question remains, will China try to rebalance away from a export-led growth model or not, knowing full well that if they drive up Chinese consumer demand, that'll also create the preconditions for democracy. So we got some pretty big decisions out there on the table, I think, for all world leaders at the moment.
Many have been talking about the fact that China has been trying to rebalance its economy, but you just don't buy that argument.
Well, if you look at the numbers, you don't see it. I mean, what we see out of China in the last 12 months is a fiscal stimulus package that's second only to the US in total size and as a percentage of GDP. And on top of that, we see this unprecedented bank lending from basically state-owned banks to state-owned corporations. I think the figures were more bank lending in the first quarter of 2009 than in all of 2008, and 2008 was already a record year. That's just pumping up the Chinese productive capacity. It's got to go somewhere. Export markets in the US still seem to dominate that picture.
Speaking of going, we must say goodbye. We must close out the program. It's been wonderful to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And thank you to our guest host, Geoffrey Garrett, Chief Executive of the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Well, that is it for Squawk Australia this morning. Squawk Box Asia is on the top of the hour. I'm Karen Cho. See you in 2.